All right, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Mind Your Mind Masterclass for November. If you're joining us, we would appreciate you kindly assist us to put your microphone on a mute mode while we await our guest keynote speaker, who is the chairperson for the African Board for Coaching, Consulting, and Coaching Psychology. My name is Joshua Awesome, so just a few protocols I'd like to just highlight. It will be appreciated if during the duration of this meeting, you kindly keep your microphones on mute mode. But I'd just like to take a moment to just talk a little bit about the African Institute of the Mind. So a little over a year ago, I had the privilege to found and start the African Institute of the Mind with a mission to mind the minds of Africans, one mind at a time. And we all know what has happened in the last 6+ months with COVID in our country, continent, and the world, and how it's helped us to learn, hopefully unlearn a lot, and also relearn so we can keep learning how to better live, love, and eventually leave a legacy on this planet. So I'd just like to take a few minutes to just talk about what we will be focusing on today. If you're joining us, we welcome you, but would also like to also announce that even though this edition is to celebrate International Men's Day and Month, we're excited that people, so long as you live on the planet, you're welcome. And we would appreciate, again, please, can we put our microphones on mute? And so just to bring clarity to this, we'd like to welcome everybody. But for the next few minutes, I'd like to take a moment to just also talk about what we typically want to do here. So for about 20 minutes or less, I will do a mini welcome, and then I will pass the microphone or presentation, as it were, to our guest keynote, who will then take us through what he has prepared or share from his perspective and experience. And then if there are questions, we are welcome and open to ask. Otherwise, we will just basically share thoughts, and then we will call it a day. So I will be sharing a very interesting experience that actually happened to me the last 48 hours, if I'm sure. Is it 40? I think 48 hours or less now. So I work in Santon City, which is where I run my coaching psychology practice and some other businesses that I'm privileged to run. And we had finished for the day and the week, and I was kindly assisted and dropped off at the How train by our project leader, who's also on this Zoom meeting today. And without knowing or planning for it, I exited Santin City and then walked into the How train that departed Santin. And as it began and got to a certain point, the storm, for those who recollect, if you live in South Africa, it was very stormy. And the electricity got cut off. And the How train that I was aboard experienced a power cut. Now, when that happened, we suddenly began to notice that the train began to slow down. Nobody knew what was happening. But I have commuted using the How train for a very long time, that I am pretty much used to that commute. Now, as I commuted, something very interesting that I always do, and I'm sharing this from a mental agility point of view, because every one of us will at some point in our lives experience a crisis of sorts. Now, I plug my ears every time that I get on the How train to listen to something that tunes me into a calm state, because the ride sometimes goes underground and gets bumpy. And as I did that, I would never forget, we typically don't hear the voice of the coach or the pilot or the train driver. But as the voice of the train driver came on air, people began to look and wonder what was happening. And I would never forget, there was facial expressions on the face of people who are aboard the train. And that caught my attention. So I removed my earpieces and I began to listen to what he was saying. Now, his voice communicated a fear of sorts, and I'm speaking from experience now. His voice communicated some fear of sorts, and that really took hold of the train. And I would not forget, if I didn't remove the earpieces, I would not have heard. So pretty much what I did was I tuned into my environment. And in tuning to my environment, I began to listen and get drawn into the energy within the How train. And he announced that the power had been cut off, and the train was going to gradually ground to a halt while they tried to rectify it. Now, in less than 5 minutes after he announced that, we suddenly began to notice security people walk back and forth on the How train. And then the next thing that happened, we saw someone walking towards a particular direction. And the area I was sitting was in between the first and the second cart. So they came towards the area I was sitting and opened a particular door that had electrical devices. And as I saw them flip the thing, I was curious, and I said to him, is there something you want to tell us? And he said, well, because we have lost power and due to the storm and the surge, they are trying to now save power on the train. And what they are going to do is they are going to switch off the air conditioning so that the lights can stay on. Now, as he announced that, I think several women and people who are around me heard it, and they were very uncomfortable with what had happened. And as I share this with you, this experience is one that I would never forget, as people around me began to feel uncomfortable. People began to make phone calls, calling family, calling friends. Interestingly, our guest speaker and keynote, who's also the chairperson for the African Board for Coaching, Consulting, and Coaching Psychology, was one of the persons that I look up to in the industry. And I reached out to him and also reached out to a couple of other persons, including my members of my team, to let them know what was happening, and my family. I would never forget, less than 30 minutes or thereabout, the aircon going off, the entire lights on the train also went off. And we were literally in the dark. From 30 minutes, it switched to 1 hour. And people were walking up and down, and panic began to kick in. Now, at that point, when I began to feel the pressure and a loss of air on the train, I wanted to do something very important, which I want everyone who is on this call to listen to. I have been on that train for about a decade now. So I have learned from my past experience of, maybe a brief stop of 5-10 minutes on the train, to realize that learning from the past is good. However, sensing on how to lead in the future before it emerges is possible through what I will call a source dimensional thinking. So you plug to your source, and many of us, could call the creator the Almighty. Some will use different expressions, but more importantly, I call it source dimensional thinking, where you plug into the source. And by plugging into your source, you have resource, as it were, to be able to help you navigate through what you do not have control over. And at that point, for me, what was important was not to try to scream, because screaming was not going to change the current situation. And the reality is that at that point, some people began to scream. I mean, think about it. The train had stopped, the air condition was switched off, and then the lights went black. There was no light. Everywhere was dark. And this was past 7 p.m. in the night. Now, as this began to happen, instead of allowing the whole panic on the train to overwhelm me, I plugged my earphones back on and began to distract my mind from the current environment I found myself. Now, bearing in mind that I did not have control over what was happening around me, what I had control over was what was happening inside me. And in order not to be sucked into the panic on the train, I decided that it was time that I focused on my focus. And my focus for me was giving my full attention to what was happening inside me. And what was happening inside me was I had been initially sucked into the panic. But by being sucked into the panic, I decided to manage how I was feeling by not allowing myself to be pulled by the panic that was happening on the HOW train. And this is what I began to do. I began to listen to music that helped shift my cognitive space. And as I began to do that, the one thing that I would never, ever forget was I was breathing in a manner that helped me to be aware of how I was feeling. But in noticing how I was feeling, I was using my breath to bring me out of that external box, and using my breath to bring me into a box that brought fresh life within me. And you may call it box breathing if you understand what it is. So I took one breath in and held my breath. And in holding my breath, my eyes closed. And then I took another breath out. So for me, it was, I am breathing in health. and exhaling any distractions and discomfort. That singular action began to create calm and help my mental space. And as it helped my mental space, I then got pulled back into the train situation by one of the security operatives. And he came to me and looked at me and said, "Excuse me, sir, can you please put on your face mask?" And I said to him, "I'm sorry, I would not put on my face mask because at this point, for the sake of my mental health, I need to keep this face mask off." Now, the lesson for me there was I needed to care for myself. And as much as my life mission is to provide support and try to inspire people and try to bring relief to the minds of people as a stress reduction specialist and one who uses coaching psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy to assist people to experience calm. With the darkness inside the train, I couldn't help anybody. And that lesson was a vital lesson for me. Many times, many of us are trying to help people when we should first and foremost focus on our own well-being. You cannot save or support any person until you are centered, as it were, until you are saved, as it were. And that was what I did. Fast forward to an hour and a half later, then I was calm and then tried to listen to the announcements and guidance of the people on the how train. It was a terrible panic. I would never forget there was even a blind man on the train who had to be taken to the pilot's case area because many people had gotten really agitated, screaming, crying in fits and moments that was beyond control. But a vital lesson for me there is that crisis will not write you a memo letter when it shows up. Crisis will show up in your life, will show up in your space, will show up around you without necessarily asking for your permission. The question is, how ready will you be when crisis emerges? How prepared will you be? The best time to be prepared for crisis that will happen is the day before it emerges. The next best time is now. And this is why we are hosting this Mind Your Mind Masterclass that focuses on mental agility. Now, I'm going to hand over this session to a distinguished person who I have great respect for. He is also the chairperson of the African Board for Coaching, Consulting, and Coaching Psychology, which I'm also privileged to sit on the board with. But I'd like you to hear my concluding thoughts about that how train experience. It felt like a mini COVID situation where we were locked in, like a lockdown of sorts. There was nowhere to go. The only place that I could go was within. And I ask you to consider caring for yourself. And self-care is not out of place in this time and season. Care for yourself, care for your well-being, look after yourself. Don't overdrive yourself to the point where your well-being is compromised. And I would never forget that all the preparation that I have been doing for myself to support myself brought me into that space and place where I was able to be in a mentally agile space that helped me to 2 hours afterwards, when the light came back on and the air condition came back on, and then electricity was restored on the train, we were then able to then commute and head to our destination. And as we got to the train station before my stop, I saw a woman limping. I don't know what had happened, but what I would never forget is that we were all on the same train, but we left with different experiences. I hope that this short story I have shared from my life experience about the How train will help somebody appreciate the power and possibility that self-care and mental agility can help and bring to you. And I'm sure you would learn one or two other things from my chairperson of the African Board for Coaching, Consulting, and Coaching Psychology, who is our guest speaker today in person of Dr. Mongezi Makalima. All right, so this is my welcome to everybody. Thank you for those joining us. I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Mongezi for his presentation. Over to you, my chairperson.
Dude, that's not fair. You didn't tell me I was going to do a presentation. I thought you were going to ask me questions. So I didn't I didn't prepare a presentation. But good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Josh, for the invite. So before I even start talking, perhaps let me check with everyone what would be the reason that you joined. So if you can just put it in the chat, what is when you agreed to attend, what is the one thing you were hoping you will get out of this? I know that the topic is mental agility, toward particularly at the end of Men's Month. What was your expectation? So I'm very good with silence. So when I'm quiet, it's not because I'm disconnected. So just waiting to see some responses. Aibu. There you go. Okay, that's from Danny. How to mind our mind. Great. How to be in control of self. Thank you for that. If I can see some more. One thing that's always useful with these kinds of sessions is to make sure that the people that get out what they were expecting. I think that's already part of the minding your own mind, because otherwise you guys will be in very big alpha waves, being really mad at me. How to react quickly. Thank you, Esther. And Mofope, curiosity, and definitely looking forward to learning how to optimize in this period of stress. Thank you, that's useful. Understand and learn the techniques. Thank you, Mlungisi. My partner in crime in Botswana. Welcome. Cool. So I kind of see the direction in which it's going. So I'm just then gonna get on with it, but please keep putting stuff in the chat. I didn't really prepare a presentation, so I'll really speak from the heart. And after that, I'll open this thing up for conversations, and please ask me questions. I prefer to work more with questions as I do. So I work quite a bit as well, not quite a bit, quite a lot as an executive coach with clients across the world. And in November last year, I was nominated one of the top 50 global coaches in the world. We had people there like Marshall Goldsmith and some of the people that you read about in the MBA books. So it was quite exciting just to be sitting in that room. What I didn't know at that time as many of us didn't, was the kind of year we were going to have in 2020. One of the other things I have to say is I was trained, or I have been trained as a stress coach, and I probably want to then start there, because what then happened is that I think I actually caught the corona in Feb, but I didn't know because nobody was talking about it really at that point. Although I'm in the news space and with Vuga Online Radio, I was still really just seeing it as one of those crazy topics that people bring up. If you watch the news, you'll know that there's good news and then there's news. And most of the time, a lot of what you see on the radio, a lot of what you see on television, in the newspapers, and what you hear on the radio is stuff that rather raises our temperature as opposed to calming us down. So what then happened is that we had to go into lockdown. Going into lockdown is very strange to me because I spent only 8 days of the year in South Africa, with most of my time spent across the continent and in different parts of the world with my clients all over the world. So it was a bit of an interesting one because I'm not really used to just being home. But most importantly, and which is already the first thing I really want to bring up, is that the human mind is expansive, which means the human mind doesn't respond very much to being boxed. So as a result of the instruction that is saying you shall stay indoors, your body starts responding in a violent manner. Your brain starts responding in a violent manner to that instruction, which became very interesting, of course, while I was watching everybody go into lockdown and being told by the president to stop moving around because there is this thing that nobody knows. And of course, conspiracy theories were kicking around and there was fear all over the place. So I'm not immune from fear, which meant in as much as I was doing things like everybody else, somewhere that first week of March, second week of March, I got into a panic attack. I haven't had a panic attack since 2007. Now, if you've never had a panic attack, you don't want to have one because you literally feel like you're dying, but you're watching yourself. So it is the strangest thing. You really do want to die because it's almost like your body is just giving up on you. Your heart is beating fast. Your brain is rushing. You can literally hear your blood going through or past your ears. You're hot all over and then you're cold. Your nervous system, in terms of your hands, you're essentially feeling like you're losing touch. You're going into paralysis. That's the power of the brain. Now, fortunately, because I have learned these tools many years ago when I quit my job and I had this panic attack for the first time, I had studied psychology forever at that time in 2007, but I still had not learned about, I had not experienced a panic attack. I had studied psychopathology, which is essentially the space of mental wellness in this instance, and still I had not experienced a panic attack. I could read about it in the books, right? So because I had those tools, I was able to get myself out of it. Trick number one. So you probably want to make a note of this because I know you might miss it. Some people might miss it. Our body, when it is faced with overwhelming circumstances, is designed to essentially protect itself. So it has a lock mechanism or a cut mechanism, just like the train the train that you were speaking about, Joshua did, because it is supposed to then protect the rest of the train and the rest of the engineering from the power surge. And our body does the same. So a panic attack is essentially one of the body's mechanism to essentially help us to realize we are in trouble. So it's a signaling space to the body. Now, a panic attack, you can note this down, a panic attack is fear of fear. When somebody is experiencing a panic attack, they're experiencing fear of fear. Now, how does fear happen? So fear, okay, so I want to shift a little bit. Let me take it a little bit so that it will make sense. So many times we spend a lot of time when we talk about ourselves, we talk about we spend a lot of work talking about our mind. We spend a lot of time talking about our body. We never talk about our spirit. But in African spiritual framework, we essentially talk about the body, the mind, and the spirit. Mele, pelo, le moya, in Sesotho, in my language, that's how you would say it. But in the Western framework that we tend to work in, we tend to focus quite a lot on the physical as opposed to on the spiritual. And I'm bringing this up for a particular reason. When you're experiencing fear, fear is registered in the brain. How is it registered? The body sees something that's unfamiliar, that is about to get you in danger. Now, at the bottom of your brain, there's a little bit of it's not a nerve, but it's a body part. It's this size, probably smaller than this, and it is called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the space of fear in your brain. Immediately it experiences something that's unfamiliar, that's unknown, it will push hormones, cortisol, into the body. Cortisol is essentially the hormone that is then supposed to give you the potential or ability to run. It's our animalistic aider. It is our animalistic fuel. So when a zebra sees a lion, the same happens. The amygdala secretes hormone cortisol, which then makes the zebra able to run faster, the heart beats faster, but every other part of your brain shuts down. Now, here's a problem. We live like this every day in our world. Because we are not paying attention to spirit, we are just paying attention to body. How many times have you woken up to something that's unfamiliar? This morning, just think about this morning, how many things that you don't know did you do? Before you got onto this session, did you even know who I am? Before you got into this session, did you know what we are going to talk about? When you woke up in the morning, did you know how the sun? All of those things are effectively sources of fear and discomfort. So technically, when people talk about stress, which is essentially what fear is the body experiencing unfamiliar symptoms, or an unfamiliar experience, an unfamiliar experience. And many times when we are experiencing stress, we're acting, sometimes that stress is below the awareness. We see it, but it's below the awareness. We feel it, but we are not really noticing it. I'll talk a little later about gamma waves, beta waves, alpha waves, and all of that. So you're going to have a nice brain psychology today. Because in order to be able to know how to manage yourself, you actually need to know how your anatomy works and how it actually creates it, because then you can be able to manage this whole story. So bear with me a little bit. So the stress is essentially that response. Now, we experience stress every day. And what happens is, then it means you have cortisol every day. Cortisol is an alcohol in a sense. And what it actually does is, the more of it in the blood there is, the more it actually kills you. Because the body is really designed to have so much cortisol just to enable you to run away from the lion. But as human beings, we run away from the lion essentially every day, and that's not natural. And already that's the first thing that gets in the way of mental agility, because if your brain shuts down, what then happens is you can't think, you're just reacting. And every day we spend time like a dog. And when I was doing my stress coaching, the first thing that they did was put, what do they call them, Josh? Those electrodes on my body and on my brain, so that I can feel.
EEG.
Yes, I can feel all my body feedback, so that my body can give me feedback and realize how scared I am, even though I don't know how scared I am. And what I realized from that perspective was that we are thinking, we are living like dogs. So we breathe like. Now, here's the second thing you need to know already about mental agility. The more oxygen you have in your body, the smarter you are. Now, what cortisol does is, when it gets into your bloodstream, it essentially is depleting your blood and your body of oxygen. Which means, if you're together with your brain shutting down in terms of the cortex and other parts of the brain that actually helps you think and make logic, which is the mind piece, you start doing what? You start just reacting, and you're killing your body. And now you're now also breathing like this. When you're breathing like this, you're not getting any kind of oxygen into the body. You're probably getting very small units of oxygen, because technically the body is designed to give you as much oxygen as you need so that it can go into the blood. So the size of your lungs will determine how much oxygen you actually get into your body. So the bigger you are, the more oxygen you need, and the bigger your lungs, which means you need to breathe more. Now, if you're breathing like this, you're already in trouble. So already, second thing to already pay attention to in minding your mind, and essentially being able to get your mental agility, breathe. So wherever you are right now, where you're sitting, I saw some of you were sitting backwards, and then some of you were leaning. You probably noticed at some point I was also leaning on a chair, but I decided to come and sit upright a little bit, just so that I can have a lot more of the energy flowing in my body, rather than when you're lying like this. Because when you're lying down, your lungs go down, they collapse a little bit, which means you're not able to get more oxygen to do the kind of work you do. So I want to invite you already. I want to pause here for 2 seconds. Invite you to sit upright. Take a deep breath. Try to count to 7. And then take it out. Yes. Then again, breathe in. And then out. Yeah. If you're feeling dizzy, stop. Because when you're feeling dizzy, it actually means you have a lot more oxygen. You have a lot of oxygen that has gone into your brain. That's actually how amazing our body is. So essentially then, just by doing that, you're bringing a lot more oxygen into the brain through the blood. And that's incidentally is the process that you actually need to do to cut off the cortisol and fear process. So whenever you are afraid, whenever you're feeling anxious, whenever you're in the car and you're angry, whenever your wife is throwing a tantrum and you are annoyed, and you are getting now into that storm of annoying each other, your children screaming and shouting, the thing that you need to learn is already to do what we've just done. About 7 seconds of breathing in. You don't have to do 7 seconds. You can go as far as you can go. Just make sure you don't faint, because if you take too much oxygen, you will black out. You will black out, because our brain is designed for balance, right? So already that's the first thing. The second thing then comes with, and so let me just wrap this piece up around fear. So there's a book, by the way, so I'm summarizing all of these things. There's a book that if you want to get it, it's beautiful. It's like the best book you can actually get about the stuff. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get an Ulcer. Why Zebras Don't Get an Ulcer by Dr. Benson. Dr. Benson is one of the leading authors in terms of stress. So if you need techniques, approaches, and just get yourself that book. There's not much I'm going to say, because I'm going to quote a lot of the stuff that he says anyway. Now, I mentioned an ulcer, so I'm bringing this up for a reason. Now, the second thing that actually happens when your body is in stress is that because of the cortisol and all the other negative hormones, or too many, because there's no negative hormone, or too many hormones that are in the body, what then happens is your body, two things happen. The first thing is your nerves get frayed. They kind of, in the longer term, in the medium to long term, they get eaten. It's almost like, when you have spirit or petrol, and you put it on a soft thing, a soft a material. What does it do? Acid. It eats it up a little by little. Cortisol and some of the other hormones are, in a sense, acids. Too many of them, they eat up on your nerves. So what I want to then advise is, already when you're breathing, you are doing the second thing, which is you are already starting to reverse the process of killing your nervous system. But the third thing that happens is that you already start getting in your body things like ulcers, diabetes, because remember, diabetes is actually also a hormonal process. Insulin is one of those hormones. Our body has like thousands of hormones. It's beautifully designed so that a lot of the things actually happen in the brain before they happen in the body. So insulin kind of gets imbalanced, and then all of a sudden you have type 2 diabetes, which is adult onset diabetes. And then that's why people who have diabetes, they lose their eyes, they lose their eyesight at some point, or they lose their parts. And then for guys, the other guy doesn't work, right? Sorry, ladies, because your penis. I guess we are adults. I'm sorry. I'm hoping, Josh, we are adults, right? We don't have 18-year-olds, under 18-year-olds in the room. I forgot to check. So the vas in on your pineal glands also has a lot of nerves on it. That's why you find that a lot of guys are struggling to essentially be able to have a proper sexual intercourse. So if there's anything that you take out of this conversation, is in order to save your marriage, in order to save your love life, breathe. Then the next thing that I want to move into, so diabetes and hypertension, that's another thing. Hypertension is high blood pressure. Because of those, can you see how these things are related? Everything starts with that little hormone, and then it kind of causes a whole lot of drama, which means now you will also have a heart attack, hypertension, Hypertension is then you have high blood pressure, the veins become smaller because there's a lot of fat that gets in their thing. There's a whole lot of beautiful biology about it. Then you have heart condition, all because you were scared. And here's a scary statistic. For the last year and a half, I've been doing research on what stops leaders from achieving the results they want. Do you know what was the reason? What was the reason that they gave? Fear. 522 leaders across the continent. I asked them, what stops you from becoming the best leader you can be? Fear. Now, what does it look like in 2020? In 2020, we are sitting with coronavirus. We are faced with fear from everywhere. We are faced with fear on the internet. You're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on all of these social media, and everybody is just pushing fear at you. So what is your technique? Next thing, to stop yourself from getting into fear. Oh, I see somebody saying, well, what's the trigger? Maybe if you can speak a little bit, I want to pause anyway. I kind of wanna drink water. Talk a little bit about your question. I want to hear more of a question than me just speaking. What do you mean? What's the trigger?
So what I mean is, hi, Dr. Mongezi. My name is Deborah. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. What I need to understand is what is the core trigger for you to get the panic attack? Because then one of my other questions was, why is it that you run out of breath? Because the one and the only panic attack that I ever got, I was actually jogging when I got the panic attack. And the worst part of it was that I was on leave. I was on holiday. I was very relaxed. There was absolutely nothing that I was really afraid of getting into. But then I got this panic attack for whatever reason. And when I left work was happy. I just started in a new department. And everybody in that new department was like, it was a happy space. It was honestly a happy space. But now, for me, I couldn't understand what the core trigger was for that particular panic attack. Because I couldn't understand what the core trigger was.
Thank you for that.
I'm asking.
Yes. Cool. Let me answer that very quickly. I think one of the things that you may have missed as I was talking about the panic attack, because I started with it, and then I said the panic attack is essentially a result of unfamiliar stimulus. So when the body becomes overwhelmed with something that is not familiar to it, and then it gets like that's with the coronavirus, for example. It's a big unfamiliar stimulus, and everybody can see it. However, every single day we are faced with very interesting unfamiliar stimuli. We are waking up every morning into something new. All of that has an effect. But because we are walking around not conscious, because a lot of these things happen below awareness, below consciousness. I mean, even with me, the example I just gave, I wasn't exactly quite afraid. In fact, at my rational level, I was saying, this is a flu, man. There's no way where this thing is going to go and all of that. So I don't even think this thing was caused by the coronavirus. This thing was caused pretty much when I now went to do my own self-therapy. It was caused by my fear of death. You know why I was afraid of death? Because I have a lot of work to do on earth. I want to live until I'm 92. So in a deep psychology, all of us walk around with expectations and intentions. When those expectations are not met, whether directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, you get into a fear mode. But most of the time, your body can deal with it, just like your body can essentially deal with flu. Because every time people go to the doctor, and have to go and get medication for flu. It's not it's not for the flu. It's for the symptoms of the flu. So that the less the symptoms you see, the less you get into an explicit fear mode, which means I think in psychology they I forgot that word now, but it's not the pills that heal you, it's your mind. Because the mere idea that you are drinking something, it calms you down. So with you changing jobs, I'm hearing that there was something about changing jobs. There was already a level of anxiety that was happening there. If you actually start exploring, because there's lots of research that shows that the top 5 stressors in the world, the first one, believe it or not, is divorce, not death, is divorcing a spouse. The second one is then the death of a spouse. The third one is moving house. People think, moving house, I'll be fine. But that thing, people don't notice, but it puts a lot of stress. 10 years later, people actually only experience, that's another thing I think you probably need to know, people only experience the effects of that stress most of the time 10 years later because it piles up. I don't know if that's useful, but I want to move on. I'm seeing one of the things I've learned is to study micro expressions, and I'm seeing something that says Josh is going to be telling me you're running out of time. So essentially then I mentioned only 3 for the purpose of time. But if I need to, I just want to wrap up this piece, and then if I do, then I'll share it. Because also one of the things I don't want to stress people about is to go on and on without finishing, and then because that also causes stress. So the third thing then, with all of the stuff that I've spoken about, is exercise. Exercise essentially is a way of making sure that you are triggering other hormones in the body. There are 2 hormones that you continuously want to work with. And exercise here doesn't mean work very hard. Exercise here doesn't mean go to super gyms and push rocks. Actually, it can have an opposite effect to what you're looking for. You want to get to an optimal level of activity such that you have, and I wanna actually draw, Josh. I don't know. Oh yeah, your thing cannot allow me. I actually wanted to draw on the whiteboard just to show something, but your body has an optimal level. Everybody has an optimal level of. Thank you. So let me just show you quickly. Click there. I like working on my mobile because I can then draw with my hand. So this part that's going up, usually, so when you no exercise, so that's 0 exercise here. If you can, you see the whiteboard. And then this is, let's say, 5 hours of exercise. I'm just putting a number at random. Your body, everybody's body will tell you what is the right level of arousal that is healthy for you to exercise before it starts going into the pressure level, which is the unhealthy level of exercise. So I've seen people run marathons who do not even know their bodies. This is actually called the Yerkes-Dodson law, right? So there's a whole science about it. So I won't bother you with it. But the point I'm then trying to make is that when you exercise, you want to exercise in terms of your body as it does, so that you are able to. Okay, let me just close there. So that you are able to to kick off, sorry, I forgot the train of, I was trying to catch the train of my thought. You are able to catch the dopamine. And the dopamine is essentially the hormone that makes you feel happy. Well, not so much happy, but good, feel good. It's a feel good hormone. When you drink that glass of Coke, that first sip, and your body goes, but it's also incidentally the same hormone that gets people addicted, right? So you want just enough dopamine to make you feel good, because after that, as you now go and you rest for 2 hours or whatever long it takes for you to rest your muscles, the body secretes serotonin. Serotonin is now, ooh, that gym, I was like very good there. Then you're feeling at peace. So that's the second thing that you need to do to get into mental agility. The third and last thing that I'm going to mention here, there's plenty. So there's a whole course about this thing that takes about 2 days. So I don't want to touch on everything. The third thing that you want to do to increase your mental agility, sleep. So your body, research shows that every evening your body actually regenerates itself, such that in 64 days or so, you are no longer the same person. You no longer have the same brain cells as you had 64 days ago. So technically, you're a completely different person in terms of the brain. Of course, there's a lot of debate around, does the brain actually lose those cells? But the debate is also about, does it reuse it? So this is essentially the whole idea about how the brain creates. Help me again, Josh. There's a nice English name. You know, English on Sunday runs away, because my data for English runs away on Sunday. Brain elasticity. So your brain is elastic, which means when you need something, it creates the cells for that. But when you don't sleep, you're not able to recreate the cells and the stuff that you need in terms of the debris that the brain throws away, such that you are usually continuously using old cells and some of the things that disable you. Now, people will say, but how many hours should I sleep? I say, I don't know. Everybody will tell you about 7 hours. Neuroplasticity, thank you. Yes, thank you. That's actually the nice big word that I was looking for. Everybody says it's 7 hours. It's not 7 hours. Everyone has their time. My time, my sleep pattern is a broken sleep pattern. So people say, oh, I have a doc, I have a anxiety. Oh no, they call it. Oh, I have insomnia. No, you don't have insomnia. Most of the time, the people that come to me saying they have insomnia, they don't. What they have is probably a misunderstanding of their sleep pattern. And as soon as they start understanding their sleep pattern, they're fine. My sleep pattern, for example, I sleep for 4 hours and then I wake up and I'm fully awake. Usually I used to say I've lost sleep. But then after learning about myself, I realized, no, I haven't lost sleep. My brain cycle is designed such that after 4 hours, I'm back into awakeness and it kicks off. It's almost like there's a mechanism, an alarm clock that says, get up now. And it doesn't matter where I am, I will wake up in 4 hours. But because I know that, I don't stress, because remember now, what will then make you feel like you have insomnia is the fact that you're worried about it because somebody somewhere said you have to sleep for 7 hours. No. Then I will sleep. What will happen is I will continue my life. I will do what I need to do. If I have work to do, I will do it. After 2 hours, while I'm resting and I'm in bed, I go back into sleep for 2 more hours. And it's full, fitful sleep. Because in your sleep, you want to take your body into what they call delta waves, at least. If you're not getting into delta wave sleep, you're not sleeping. There are people that think that by going to bed and putting your hand on a pillow, you're resting. No, you're not. If you're putting your head on your pillow and you're still on alpha waves and even some beta waves, you are still very active in your head. So the next thing that you need to do to increase your mental agility is to start studying your sleep pattern, and then making sure that when the time to sleep comes, you sleep. Now, there is no diagnosis that I can do here to say this is the best way for you to fall asleep, because like we are 8 billion people on earth, 7.85 perhaps, give or take, but all of us are different. So last message then for this is, with all of this stuff, know yourself. Know your spirit. What is your spiritual beliefs? Sometimes when we are not connected to the world and we are not connected to where we are, is because we actually are not connected spiritually to the universe. At least that's my belief, is that we are not just bodies that are floating around. We are continuous vessels of energy. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with God, but it could be God for some of us that believe. It could be the universe for those who believe. It doesn't matter. The question is, what do you believe in that is beyond you? Because if you don't believe in something much bigger than yourself, you're going to continuously feel like everything is on your shoulders. Sometimes it's good to just blame God for things that are not happening, and then after that, make a plan to get up again and then ask God to help you. Sometimes it's very useful. That's why religion helps, right? But it is also really important, guys, to pay attention to where your spirit is. Because when your spirit is balanced and it's correct, your body follows. And then your body houses your mind is healthy, which means then you can think in a more agile way. You can be able to think faster. 3 days after my stress course, I can tell you it was a Friday when I had the electrode. They asked me to keep them on for 3 days and record myself. I can tell you by Saturday night, because it looked Friday, I essentially slept into delta waves for only 4 hours. But the rest of the time, I did not sleep at all. But by Sunday night, I had slept full 6 delta hours. Monday, I was feeling so smart. My brain was sharp. I was able to essentially make much cleverer decisions because I had more oxygen in my body. I had more agility in my body, not just in my brain. And at the same time, I was balanced spiritually. I'm going to rest there, and then we'll see if there's a space for questions. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mongezi. It's been a very insightful time as you unpacked some of the learnings that talks to mental agility. But more importantly, as we begin to wrap this up, I don't know if anyone has a question. You're welcome to type it in the chat box. While we check out if there is 1 or 2 questions, we'll gladly take it. However, while we look out for the questions, I wanted to also quickly highlight, yes, Dr. Mongezi was talking about top 5 stressors, and I'm not sure if you finished them, but I heard you talk about divorce, death, moving houses, and someone was asking about it. So maybe that's one of the 2 questions you'd like to answer. Okay. And if anybody has any question, you're welcome to also type in the chat box while he unpacks the last 2. Over to you, Dr. Mongezi.
All right, cool. I'm going to try to be short. So right at the top, it's divorce. The second one is then loss of a spouse. The third one is moving house. The fourth one is losing your job. And then the fifth one, believe it or not, is getting married.
All right.
So,
Quite interesting. Yeah,
some
please
people
go ahead,
might
sir.
be thinking getting married should be a joyous celebration. Joy is a choice. It's actually a response, but your body doesn't know the difference. Your body experiences an unfamiliar stimulus, and it tries to respond to it, and it gives you a little bit of stress.
Okay, so someone was asking a question, how to, how can one remain calm, especially, when they get angry? So,
yes, I like that question. So, what happens when we get angry is essentially we don't get angry because of something that's happening to us. We get angry because we are making a choice at that moment. So it sounds crazy when I say that, because people say, "What? Well, how can I choose to get angry?" But it's essentially a learned response. When you see a tiger, you run. The people think now because it's a tiger, I'm running because it's a tiger. No, there's a step in between. A step in between is I saw a tiger, I think it's gonna bite me, I run. And it's that piece which is where you make a decision in terms of the processing of the mind. So how do you slow down that process? You do what I've actually just did with you. The simplest one is to count backwards in terms of 10, 9, 8, not 10, 10, 9, 7, 8, 9. No. 10, breathe. 9, breathe. By 7, this thing kind of doesn't, if it's a very small thing that's making you mad, you find that it kind of doesn't matter. You'll actually walk away, because that's actually what happens when you see a lion. The best way to actually respond to a lion is not to run. It actually is to stop. And then after that, you look it straight in the eye, and then you make yourself as big as possible. This is exactly the same process here. You stop, you breathe. 10, 9, 8. By 7, you your body has kind of calmed down because you've moved from the amygdala to the frontal cortex, and you're now working with the frontal cortex, and you're now rational, and all that cortisol that was flowing into your brain has kind of come down. But for some people, it doesn't really work very quickly because maybe it's the stimulus is too big. Then it's to force your body, your brain, your body to go into rational mode. How do you do that? Ask yourself 2 big questions. Question 1, this person, whether you kick their buttocks or whether you bend their house, will it change your life? Will it change this thing? The thing that just happened, actually, because the answer is yes, it will change your life. But the question is, will it change the thing that has happened? Chances are no. So we stress because we are so focused on what has happened. Things that have happened are like a river. They have moved. So now you're trying to catch up with this thing that's going in the river. That's already what you're doing. That's madness. So think about that image if it also helps that you are chasing this thing. The second thing is, what would be the best response for your health? I had someone that made me, well, they didn't make me angry. I got angry in response to some of their behavior, and I almost killed them, like literally killed them. I had an okapi knife sitting in front of me. It was scary. But I could see in my breathing exercises the results, the consequences, that I'm the director of the board who's going to end up in jail. And it doesn't matter whether I was right. After that, in terms of the CIPC and the Companies Act, I can never be a director again. And I love being a director. So take your mind back into what do you really need? And is your response going to get you what you need? Short answer.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Mongezi. So if there's no other question, we would like to now begin to wrap this up. We know we
sorry, Josh, if I
yes.
can interrupt, last one, I see there, Mofope says, how long do we need to study sleep patterns?
Okay. I didn't see that. Sorry. Go ahead.
It doesn't really matter too much. I think if you have at least 3 pieces of data, let's say, for example, 3 days, so we have something that we call a stress erase, which is a product that kind of gets you hooked up onto this thing for 3 days. 3 days and 3 nights, but you keep it on yourself. It records the data and loads it onto an online session. So by online cloud, in 3 days' time, we already have a pattern. The important thing is not how long, it's the pattern. I hope that's useful.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mongezi. As we begin to wrap up, I would like to mention that the African Institute of the Mind is supported by Calm in America with a Calm app, which we basically tend to use to support our work here at the African Institute of the Mind. And so would like to close this session with a short 10 minutes mindful moment so that you have a tester of the value that what I had indicated helped me to be able to survive in the midst of that situation about the how train for those who heard it initially. And also Dr. Mongezi highlighted it briefly. And for the information, for your information, I'd like to also announce that we have gifts for everyone who has joined us here today, which will be a 30-day access to using the Calm app to be able to assist you with lowering your stress and also get you into a deeper state of mental agility. So you're welcome to drop an email to assistant@theawesomecoach.online. Vinolia, who handles administration for us at Awesome Group, will coordinate sharing the 30-day Calm gift access for you. The second gift you would also be getting is an ebook of my New York Times best-selling co-authored book with Brian Tracy called The Secret to Winning Big. As we approach the end of the year, it's just good to, be kind as much as you can, where you can, with what you can. And I just thought it would be nice for me to basically use this opportunity to share this. I believe that 1 or 2 members of my team on this Zoom meeting, so kindly please share the email that I just highlighted so that I can just focus on taking us to the close of this with the mindful moment session using the Calm app.
Welcome to the Daily Calm. Today we'll be exploring the big effect of small choices. Start by settling in. Close your eyes and take a moment to lengthen your spine. Relax your shoulders. Soften your lips, your jaw, your forehead, feel the whole face soften. And now take a few long, deep breaths to draw you into this moment, filling the lungs up with air and slowly releasing the breath. Full, deep breaths entering and leaving the body. And with each exhale, soften and let go just a little bit further. And now return to its natural, without forcing. Follow your inhales as they move in through your nose. And as you exhale, feel the breath releasing. Cool air flows in. Warm air flows out. Follow the breath. Allow the breath to anchor you. Inhaling, the cool air draws in through the nostrils. Exhaling, warm air releases. And now, gently relax your attention. Today, I'd like to talk about the big effects of small choices. Every day, we make a multitude of choices. Many of them are tiny choices we make unconsciously. We're so used to doing the same thing over and over, we don't even realize we're making a choice. Perhaps we eat meals late in the evening, even though it impacts our sleep. If only an occasional lapse, the consequences are minimal. But if repeated regularly over time, that small choice can add up and have a big impact on our sleep, health, and life. Imagine for a moment a vast ship making a long passage across the Atlantic. The ship can't turn very quickly, but it doesn't need to. Just a tiny change in direction leads to a very different destination. The choice to shift direction by a small amount is sustained over many miles of travel. Even the smallest change adds up to something significant when it's maintained over the long term. Through mindfulness, we can bring more awareness to these seemingly automatic choices and actively contemplate what's best for us. We don't have to dwell on negative or anxious thoughts. We don't have to be hard on ourselves when things don't go the way we intended. By recognizing that we have a choice in small matters, we can begin to steer our life in the direction we want it to go, one tiny choice at a time. As John C. Maxwell said, life is a matter of choices, and every choice you make makes you. And as we near the end of the session, tune into your body, feeling connected and whole. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes. I hope you enjoyed today's Daily Calm. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
All right. I hope this has been very useful and helpful for us. Dr. Mongezi, just before we close, someone out in the UK had indicated that she just moved houses. Actually, and she said she just moved houses and she resonates with the stress caused by moving homes. And it made her physically sick. And she was trying to ask a question that she suffers from insomnia or a lack of sleep. How can she adjust and understand her body or sleep pattern as it is inconsistent? This came from our YouTube channel. So I wanted you to talk to that before we then close on today's Mind Your Mind Masterclass. Over to you, sir.
Josh, it would be dangerous for me to talk about it without necessarily talking to her. So my invitation would probably be to have at least a 30-minute free consultation session so that there are other things that she can tell me. Because the thing about our bodies is that there's a history, like you just heard now in your daily calm. We have a whole history of patterns. And the questions, I want to ask a couple of questions before I can say, this is the reason and this is what you can do. So I think that would be my short answer. And it's actually an answer for everyone. And the principle I live in that I'm also helping people to kind of pick up is you're 1 in 8 billion. Essentially, there's nobody ever created. Nobody exists now, and nobody will ever exist that is like you, ever. Which essentially means every time you're feeling stressed, you are essentially, chances are you are comparing yourself to somebody else's experience who's never been like you, who will never be like you, and who isn't like you even now. And that's where most of stress comes from. And that would be my more generic answer to her. But I'd rather she gives me a buzz if she contacts me, and then we can set up a 30-minute session free, and then we can talk about it.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Mongezi. I think we've now come to the end of this session. So I'm just going to type in the one email where everybody needs to send their.
Josh, can I interrupt your process? I'm annoying. I'm annoying in that way. I'm a process Nazi. While you're typing in, I'm curious to hear what's the one word that people are taking out of the session.
Great. So I was going to close with that.
Oh, you were. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. But again, so Dr. Mongezi has asked us. You want to type one word that you are taking away from this session. Please, you're welcome to type it in the chat box. But I'd like to also use this opportunity to thank Dr. Mongezi. I deeply appreciate you, sir. Dr. Mongezi is my chairperson and the chair and president of the African Board for Coaching, Consulting, and Coaching Psychology. I am honored to be working with you as a master coach, which has helped my career, and I deeply appreciate your consistency in the industry. We also he's offered to extend a very interesting opportunity for the one person who was chiming in from the UK to do a 30 minutes consultation. I know how much he charges, so that really is very, very. Dr. Mongezi tries to be humble, which is okay. And so I see people typing in here. Tato says breathe. Kompi says neuroplasticity. Denny says calm. Kopano says patterns. So I've also typed in the email address. Everyone is welcome to send an email to and let us know that you joined the November Mind Your Mind Masterclass. And we will gladly send you 30 days access for the Calm app so that you can use it hopefully into 29th. So we will send it to you tomorrow, okay? That will be 30th of November. That means you'll be able to use it till the 30th of December, and hopefully you'll be able to breast, the tape and get into reset for 2021. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank every member of the African Institute of the Mind. I saw Teboho had asked a question at some point. And I'd also like to thank everyone who chimed in from around the world. Tolu from the UK. And Dr. Mongezi is quite interesting. The Esther you were talking about was actually my mom. She sometimes shows up on this on these sessions. My mom is going to be 75 and she still makes time for some of these interesting things.
Wow.
I deeply appreciate you, Mom. I know my nephew and nieces from around the world are also chiming in. But more importantly, everyone who joined us, we deeply appreciate you. My assistant and office administrator, Vinolia, thank you. Kompi, I see you there. Danny, I see you. Tato, thank you. Kopano, thank you. And to everyone who has stepped out before we close, I want you to know that you are just a breath away from calm mental agility and becoming the next best you. Thank you, everyone. This is me, Joshua Awesome, wishing you the very best.